In this video, we'll give you the top waiver wire players to target into week 4, along with our top reactions to week 3. I'm Jim Coventry, joined by Anthony Cervino of RotoWire. Look, waivers, things are going to get fun here. Quarterbacks, Anthony, we'll go for here first. Aaron Rodgers, real rough start to the season, 2 games. Last week, he looked like vintage Aaron Rodgers. 281 yards, 2 touchdowns against the Patriots. The throws that he was making were simply insane. Is he somebody you can consider like a top 15 guy after that performance, or do you still have him on the outside of that fringe?
You know, I think we can start considering Aaron Rodgers a top 15, top 16 quarterback. I think it's going to be matchup driven, but from what we've seen from week 1 to 2 to 3, Aaron Rodgers should be highly considered. I would start him over guys like Kirk Cousins right now.
Yeah, it was, and Rodgers ran a little bit. I just thought that was pretty cool. The defender, it was so cool. The defender hit him, and the Jets players wanted to go after him. And right away, you could tell he was asking Rodgers, "Are you okay?" And Rodgers told his guy, he kind of patted him, goes, "Back off." This guy asked me if I was okay. I thought that was pretty cool. Doesn't happen a lot, but it happened there. Sam Darnold's next. 10 touchdowns in 3 games. Look, that pace won't continue, right? But he'll get Jordan Addison back. We said it all preseason. The offensive tackles are solid. The scheme is great. He's got Justin Jefferson. Eventually, don't know what Hockenson will be if he comes back, but he'll eventually have that. Is Darnold a legitimate streamer now, or is he more than that?
Sam Darnold has been playing outstanding football, and obviously he had a lot of naysayers because of his history, but we saw with Baker Mayfield, you sometimes get with the right, coaching, and a lot can change. Sam Darnold has really outstanding weapons around him. So this doesn't shock me like it shocks some people. O'Connell's doing a great job, and we are now seeing back-to-back games over 24 quarterback fantasy points for Sam Darnold. And, the matchup against Green Bay, if you need a quarterback this week, Sam Darnold should be a locked and loaded option.
There's no doubt. And the bye weeks are coming up, not this week, but the following week. So you got to start preparing and looking ahead for those. Some of these quarterbacks might be someone, you might have a Jalen Hurts on bye in week 5. You got to think ahead to those things. Mahomes in 6, another story, another day. Caleb Williams. I was on Caleb Williams this week. First 2 weeks he was awful. Pass rush all over. I said it. The Colts had no pass rush. They can't cover. For the NFL, Williams didn't have a great game, but 363 and 2 touchdowns. So basically, I'm seeing Williams as a streaming option. If he faces a team that really can't put together a pass rush, he'll be fine. Maybe Williams gets better as the season goes on and he learns about dealing with pressure more. Thoughts on Caleb Williams?
Yeah, Williams is an NFL quarterback. He's still making mistakes, but fantasy-wise, 363. Only took off for 8 yards, but completed 63.5% of his passes. We like the weapons there. DJ Moore, Cole Kmet starting to take off a little bit. And the next 2 matchups, especially Rams, Carolina, these are matchups that you could certainly use Caleb Williams in. I don't know about Jacksonville, but then coming out of the bye, you get at Washington, at Arizona. I would certainly roster Caleb Williams. And if you have him, don't give up on him because it's going to get easier.
You know what? As you point that schedule out, there's only one game that Jacksonville will be tough because they will get after him.
Yeah.
Those other games, these defenses really don't have the personnel to completely get after him. So you may be needing him during these bye weeks. You could start him, I'm thinking, in some of these games. Andy Dalton, look, he instantly put life into the Panthers' offense. Now it's a combination of things. The Raiders were coming off a victory over the Ravens, and I said Carolina's covering this game because it's going to be a letdown spot, and all the Panthers were excited to be past Bryce Young for sure. Well, Dalton goes over 300 to 3 touchdowns. That's not going to continue. That honeymoon will end quickly. But Deontay Johnson, he matched up with him really well. He does have the offensive line. They invested it. The line is decent. It's just that Bryce Young was horrible. Dalton at this point, streaming option if you're in trouble. Certainly not reliable. Thoughts?
I don't trust Dalton as much as I would trust somebody like Sam Darnold, certainly. But I did not expect this performance, especially against a Raiders team that they're showing some signs of life. And Andy Dalton looked like the Andy Dalton back when he had AJ Green with Cincinnati. But he is somebody, look at the matchups coming up. Cincinnati and Chicago, both top 5 options against enemy quarterbacks. I'm fading them.
All right, next one probably doesn't need any extra explanation. If you're in a 2 quarterback mandatory league And if Skylar Thompson misses time, you need a warm body at quarterback when the bye week said. Tim Boyle did take over. Again, you don't like him, but if you're in a mandatory quarterback league and you got to have a body in the lineup at some point, he could play, and that's it. Nothing really to add there, I don't think, Anthony. Let's just move on to Drake May. Drake May, I don't think he's going to be starting soon. That offensive line is a disaster, and the pressure is just horrific for the quarterbacks. But May did finish that game against the Jets. He ran a little bit, which was good. Eventually, he should get in that lineup. Should somebody make a preemptive move on him if they're in a super flex league or a 2-quarterback league, if he's not rostered?
Yeah, I like Drake May. I think it's only a matter of time, obviously, before we see him. They have some decent weapons there, and he can run a little bit. So, if you're in a bind, like we were just talking about Tim Boyle, then you should certainly be stashing Drake May.
Yeah, running backs. Look, I didn't see this one coming. Rico Dowdle, has passed Ezekiel Elliott on the depth chart. It's not close. Neither's getting a lot of work, but Dowdle's getting about double-digit touches in most games, not doing much with it. But again, if you're in a league where you got to have a body in there, or a flex who's going to do something, Dowdle looks like he's the guy right now. Thoughts?
Yeah, why I worry about Rico Dowdle is those red zone and goal line touches. I still think they go to Zeke, but for everything else, Rico Dowdle is emerging, and he looks explosive when he does get some opportunities, especially as a receiver. Back-to-back games now with 5 targets.
Yeah, so there's that. Chuba Hubbard. So we don't know when Jonathan Brooks is coming back from the ACL. He's on the PUP list. It doesn't mean he's back in week 5. It could. Not sure how that's going to shake out. But Hubbard, now that they actually have a legitimate NFL quarterback, say what you want about Andy Dalton, but all of a sudden you saw Hubbard play well. The line's good. Defenses are not walking everybody up saying, oh, it's Bryce Young. He can't throw. Well, Dalton can't throw. So Hubbard had room, and Hubbard had a big game. The Raiders stink. Yeah, I understand that. But right now, if Hubbard's on waivers, right now, he should be a strong running back too with Dalton in there. Any thoughts?
Really, I don't think Hubbard should be on waivers, but we know he is. Even last week, it hasn't been good for Carolina, but he still gave us 11.6 PPR points, 10 for 64, and 4 or 5 targets for 12 yards. This week, different story, absolutely goes off, over 27 PPR points, dominated the snap share, 26 touches, and another game. This is now back-to-back weeks with 5 targets in his own right. He should absolutely be rostered, and the upcoming matchup, Cincy, middle of the pack, and Chicago, giving up the 25th most fantasy points. So these are 2 great matchups for Chuba Hubbard coming up.
I'm going to counteract that. Cincinnati's terrible. They can't stop. They couldn't stop me running the ball. I think I can get 3 yards a pop against them, and I can't run.
I'm using the fantasy point per game ranking.
Oh, that's fine. They're awful, but that's fine. No, not arguing. Just saying Cincinnati, fire them up. Brian Robinson tonight, unless they get down 30, fire them up. Bucky Irving's next. Outproduced Rachaad White as a runner, not a receiver, as a runner in each of the 3 games. It's very clear he is a significantly better runner, but White is still playing 70% of the snaps. Now, Irving's getting 10 touches per game. It is possible the team wakes up and gives him more of the rushing attempts. White's going to be the primary receiver. Irving is getting targets. Thoughts on Bucky Irving?
I think he should be rostered, stashed. I mean, if we look at the snap share this week is deceiving because Rachaad White dominated the snap share, but Bucky Irving had 1 more touch, and it wasn't even close when it comes to total yards. And eventually, Bucky Irving's going to take over this backfield.
Yeah, now White probably holds on that receiver. He's an excellent receiver. So I'm gonna give Rachaad White that. But like you said, you have to think if they have any mind in that organization, Bucky Irving's the early down guy. Roschon Johnson, look, I'm going to keep saying this. He's a career special teamer, but right now he is an opportunity because DeAndre Swift is brutal. Cannot move at all. Khalil Herbert is playing the worst football of his career. Roschon Johnson gets in because Travis Homer goes on the injured reserve. Roschon Johnson was inactive, but he plays 12 touches. He had 8 carries, 30 yards. He was the only effective Chicago back. He can catch the ball a little bit. There's a chance that he emerges into a secondary role in this backfield. Is he worth a stash?
I think he's worth a stash, but I would temper expectations until we see this offense a little bit more consistency before I would use any of these running backs.
Yeah, because Johnson is not good, but again, Swift is so bad, and I know they paid him. It's possible Johnson gets a little something. Like you said, a stash, not more. Just keep an eye on it. But if he ends up getting volume, we say it all the time, volume is king in fantasy football. You could stink, but if you get volume, you're irrelevant. Ty Chandler, 9 touches a game, not putting up strong numbers, but again, 9 touches is 9 touches. Bye weeks are coming up. Ty Chandler worth a stash?
Yeah, and this is another game. Like, this is now 3 games in a row where Minnesota is kind of controlling these matchups for the most part. And I don't know, some people think, oh, Chandler's really going to cut into Aaron Jones, or is this just change of pace and a little bit of garbage time? So yeah, he's worth the stash, but Aaron Jones to me is the guy in this backfield.
Yeah, and Aaron Jones is seeing in the 60s%. I don't remember off the top of my head, like 64. I think they don't want to give him 80% of the snaps. I think they know that's not wise, and not many running backs do. But you're right; it's been a consistent 35% snaps per game, and so it's a defined role. So I'm good call on that. Digging much deeper now. Isaac Guerrero finally saw work in a competitive game. He had, I think it was 5 carries, and the game was close. So it wasn't like he just was playing garbage time, because there was no garbage time there. Jordan Mason didn't look as dominant in week 3 as he did in week 1 and then in week 2. He's still an outstanding runner. He's still the clear lead. But and Guerrero didn't do a whole lot with his opportunities. But McCaffrey's going to miss a lot of time. Is Guerrero also worth a stash?
Yeah, not only, I don't know if he's ever going to be a standalone option, but he's one of those, contingent players where his upside is contingent to injury. And you never know, like something's going on in San Francisco. I don't know if it's years and the injury bug catching up to him, but something's not right in that water there. So yeah, you certainly roster him because you have CMC sideline. What if, knock on wood, something happens to Jordan Mason? Don't be late to the party. Get ahead of the market, especially with a team that wants to run the ball.
Yeah, you want the 49ers backfield. You can get it. People are clamoring over Elijah Mitchell through all the injuries until he went on IR. So, yeah, there's just value in that backfield. I don't know that Emmanuel Wilson of the Packers is going to be much, but he did go 14 touches for 85 yards. Marshawn Lloyd's on the IR. Don't know when he's coming back. It's already a second injury of the season, and the season barely started. And he is the clear number 2 behind Josh Jacobs. And Josh Jacobs is getting a lot of work. Is Wilson somebody you're looking at short term?
I'm going to say yes. And the reason why Josh Jacobs is getting the work, but, what we've said both on this show, he's not efficient. And if he's not getting the monster workload in terms of, what he was getting with the Raiders, how fantasy valuable is he going to be? And we saw that yesterday, 14 for 43, only 1 target for 5 yards, 5.8 fantasy points. And then we see this explosive younger player, make the most of his touches. I think there's a world where Wilson could potentially cut into some of this workload, especially on receiving downs where Jacobs is invisible.
If you're in a super, super, super deep league and you're just, again, looking for a body, Tyler Beatty probably doesn't continue, but Javonte Williams is struggling. Jaleel McLaughlin was terrible. And Beatty comes in against 9 carries, 70 yards against the Buccaneers. Again, it's not going to continue. But again, if you need a warm body and you need somebody, maybe he gets into a situational role. Anything there?
A stash at best, because if things in this backfield are still not great with Javonte and Jaleel, I believe Sean Payton's going to start featuring Tyler Beatty, because this team yesterday did play well against Tampa, who was one of the hotter teams in the NFL. So I don't think Payton would be scared to pull the plug on either one of these guys ahead of Beatty.
All right, let's go to the wide receiver position now. DeAndre Hopkins may be on some waiver wires. He had 2 catches in 2 games, so he may have been dropped in leagues. He still didn't play a lot of snaps. He still was in the 45-ish% range, but he was the only useful receiver for the Titans. 73 yards and a touchdown. Hopkins still can win at the catch point. Never was a separation guy anyway, so he will age gracefully when he's healthy. Right now, I see him as a wide receiver 3 in PPR leagues. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, you can stash him. I'm not using him. He finally had a good game against Green Bay, but is this going to continue? I need to see more progress from Will Levis before I can really depend on any of these receivers. Ridley has been nice, but I think Jair may have taken him out a little bit yesterday, and Hopkins benefited. But is Levis good enough to make multiple reads and spread this ball around? That's my biggest question right now.
I'll still say this. If you're a bad quarterback and you're looking to get a ball to somebody, you could count on DeAndre Hopkins to win at the catch point. I would throw to him every time over Calvin Ridley because I know Hopkins is not going to drop the ball, and I know he's going to box out his defender, and I know he's going to out physical him. Ridley did fine in those first couple games, but it'll be interesting to see because that is one heck of a security blanket. Like you said, we'll see what happens there. Look, some people in some league somewhere may have dropped Deontay Johnson because of Bryce Young being the quarterback. Maybe it isn't possible, but maybe it is. In that case, Andy Dalton showed exactly what we expected from Deontay Johnson. Not 122 yards and a touchdown. He's not going to get that every week, but he is a phenomenal possession receiver who gets open quickly. If he is available in any league, which again, he may not be your case, but definitely take a look at him, Anthony.
Yeah, he's certainly a must-add, especially now that this offense has a pulse with Andy Dalton. You know, we're seeing the Deontay we thought we were getting at a great value this offseason, and it wasn't a Deontay problem. It was a Bryce Young problem.
Jawan Jennings is next. He had the massive game, probably one of the best, if not the best receiver performance on the entire day. People definitely put him in lineups because there were no other options in the 49ers other than Brandon Ayuk, but nobody really saw that level of game coming. That said, when the skill position players come back, when Debo comes back, when Kittle comes back, Jennings is an insanely good blocker. He has a phenomenal role in the offense. He's going to revert back, but if he's back in the lineup without Kittle and Debo again next week, he might not do that huge game, but he certainly should be fantasy relevant at least for 1 week. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you know, what Jennings did yesterday, I don't think anybody saw coming, especially with a healthy Brandon Ayuk. We thought, hey, after 2 slow games, this would be the game. And Ayuk did see 10 targets, only caught like 5 for a scoreless 48 yards, while Jennings tore it up. So as long as I think, you know, if Kittle and Debo are both out, I think Jennings is a must start. If only one of them are sidelined, then I think it's more matchup based.
Another player, Romo Dunze, he could have been dropped in some leagues. He had the knee injury. Caleb Williams looked awful in the first 2 games. And if he's out there, he had 112 yards and a touchdown against the Colts. If you pick him up and somebody didn't really recognize he was out there, if you roster him also, I would trade him because Caleb Williams, he has a nice stretch, like Anthony said, coming up. But ultimately, I don't know if Caleb Williams is supporting a lot. Odunze is going to be a star. Anyway, if Odunze is available, grab him, but also consider trading him as well. Thoughts?
Yeah, you know, this was the game. I was actually in on this Bears offense this week, especially Roma Dunze. If you were in a bind, you needed a wide receiver. I thought the matchup was there. And again, we talked to Caleb. It was ugly, but ugly in the NFL sometimes translates to fantasy production. And we saw a little bit of a coming out party for Roma Dunze. And you know, Keenan Allen's going to eventually return, I think Odunze could potentially play himself into that number 2 spot.
Now we are in wide receivers. We did have a question about running backs. Somebody said, should we pick up Tank Bigsby or Ray Davis to stash before the game tonight? If you have the ability to do that, it would be a great idea because you never know. A running back like ETN could get dinged up. James Cook could get dinged up. Picking up a running back in that scenario, as long as you have the availability, that's definitely always a great idea because these players are one misstep away from being in a very prominent role. So that is a good use if you have the ability. A lot of the players are frozen and you can't move them out. But yeah, if you have that ability to do that. All right, back to wide receivers. This is just an overall heads up. If any Packers wide receivers were dropped while Jordan Love was out, he probably is coming back next week. I would simply say this: treat the Packers receivers like you did during draft season. So if any of them are out there, treat them exactly that way. Even like Dontavian Wicks, like a wide receiver 60-ish. If that's where he's at, and that's what you need. Anything on the Packers receivers, if any of them happen to be dropped?
Yeah, you certainly pick them up because Jordan Love is coming back sooner rather than later, possibly even as soon as this upcoming week. So yeah, like these guys, Jaden Reed's not going to be out there. I doubt Christian Watson, but you know, Wicks, Dubs, they were drafted fairly high, right? Like, you know, or 10th round or earlier for a reason, and that value instantly comes back with Jordan Love.
Yeah, Quentin Johnson's next. Didn't see much action in the game. The Chargers threw fewer than 20 passes, and Justin Herbert's on a bad wheel right now. Didn't finish the game, so that's problematic. Johnson did score another touchdown. Now, his value is going to be compromised if Justin Herbert has to miss time. But that said, Johnson does look like he belongs right now. Thoughts?
Yeah, this is the most wild one this year so far because, at least me personally, I did not think anything of Quentin Johnston coming to this year. Thought he was going to be a bust pick. Now he's not getting volume, but he's making the most of the targets he's getting in a low volume passing attack. You certainly pick Quentin Johnston up, but do I worry about using him if Justin Herbert is not in the game? If Justin Herbert misses time, then I don't think you can use any of these receivers.
No, that's going to be a real problem for them. And all right, next one. Wan'Dale Robinson. Again, he's available in a lot of leagues, averaging 8 targets a game. The 1 week he didn't have much volume. He scored a touchdown. The other 2 weeks, very, very high floor. Look, he is their possession receiver. Malik Neighbors is going to get most of the work, but Robinson's getting plenty left as well, even though he's playing about 62% of the snaps. Thoughts on Wan'Dale?
We were both into Wan'Dale coming into the year, and he's living up to expectations. Now, you brought up the one game against Washington, only 4 targets, but he did find the end zone. These other 2 games, at least 8 targets, getting the receptions, getting the yards, and bringing double-digit PPR points. And again, against Washington, he didn't get in the double digits, but 9.8. He's going to be a high-floor player possibly every week, as long as Daniel Jones continues to play competent football. We don't need Daniel Jones to be great. He needs to be competent.
Exactly. And finding the guy in the slot, that's usually not tough to do. Jalen Tolbert followed up his big week 2 game with 42 yards and a touchdown against the Ravens. Now that game got crazy in the second half, and a lot of his production came when Dallas was chasing. But I think they're going to throw the ball a lot this year. He is definitely their third receiver. And, there's a way if he plays well, he could really kind of pass Brandon Cooks. I don't know that'll happen, but it's possible. Thoughts on Jalen Tolbert?
Tolbert coming into this year, if we remember, Cooks it didn't play a lot in training camp of the preseason. He had something going on. CeeDee Lamb obviously was not there. Jalen Tolbert probably worked as a number 1 receiver and worked very closely with Dak. And we saw how that worked with players like Jake Ferguson in the past. And we are seeing that connection kind of flourish now. And this Dallas defense, I don't know if it's going to take time to adjust to Zimmer, who's been out of the league for 2 years, or it's just going to be a mess. But either way, Dallas will have to throw the football. And there's now back-to-back games. Jalen Tolbert, 5 targets, putting up some fantasy production. The matchup gets a little bit softer against New York. This guy, you say, could he pass Brandon Cooks? I think it's only a matter of time before he passes Brandon Cooks.
All right, next, Michael Wilson of the Arizona Cardinals. Opening game, he caught a 5-yard touchdown. Week 2, 2 for 31. They needed him last week. They fell behind. And the Arizona defense is not good. When they play a good offense, they can get exposed. Well, Wilson was the number 2. 9 targets, caught 8 for 64. Loved him in the preseason. He hasn't been stable. But again, for a team that's going to have to throw, he could emerge as a nice depth option, like a flex. Thoughts?
Yeah, Michael Wilson's another solid option, and I think volume is going to be an issue here, like where are these targets going to be distributed? But this was a game where Arizona, they were trailing for most of it. They had to throw the football, and it just, at least for this week, Michael Wilson was a beneficiary of that.
Next, Demario Douglas of the Patriots. He only had 2 catches for 13 yards in the first 2 games. He's a slot receiver, plays roughly 70% of the snaps, a little less than that actually. But against the Jets, he goes 7 for 69. New England has tons of protection issues. You would think they're going to have to just get the ball out and into the slot. It's probably going to have to be something they're going to have to do. Now, they do use some 2 tight end sets, which keeps Douglas off the field some. But as a PPR flex option, is there any traction there?
A little bit, and I think the stat here is for when we talked about Drake May earlier. I think this offense will improve under Drake May. Maybe I'm a little bit higher on him than most, but Brissett's only going to get them so far, and Drake May is a little bit more mobile, a little bit of a better arm. So if you have Douglas, who did play well in spurts last season, I would stash him now.
Tutu Atwell is next. And last week through like week 9 or so, he was actually a pretty viable fantasy option. He was getting some downfield looks. Now the line this year isn't as good as last year, so there's a problem. But Atwell, because of the injuries to Kupp and Nacua, he moved back into a prominent role. He goes 4 for 93 against the Niners. That was a kind of a very similar type of production line he had last year when he was a starting receiver for them. So that said, again, the protection's not great, but if the Rams are playing a team that's not really going to bring a lot of heat, Atwell could be useful until Kupp and Nacua get back. Any thoughts?
Yeah, this wide receiver room as a whole, has my mind boggled. We were all in on guys like Whittington, Robinson, Tyler Johnson, and then all of a sudden we have a Tutu Atwell sighting. I think you can roster them all because of McVay and the way this offense goes. But as far as being able to trust them or who's going to pop on a week-to-week basis, if you're not named Kyron Williams, I don't know if I want to deal with that.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. But like we said, Stafford can throw deep, and Atwell was decent in that role. But like you said, it is a dart throw. Xavier Legette, maybe you take a look at him. He's still in the mix with the number 3 with Jonathan Mingo quite a bit. Adam Thielen did suffer a hamstring injury yesterday. He's like 34 years old. If that puts him on the shelf for a while, Legette could go into a full-time role. First-round draft pick, Andy Dalton. Again, nothing special, but he's a professional quarterback. Anything about Legette?
This is a very deep league stash. You don't really want anybody on the Panthers outside of Hubbard and Deontay Johnson, maybe Miles Sanders. But if you're in a bind, you need a wide receiver, injuries, bye weeks coming up, then you could do a lot worse, I guess.
And as you got everybody out there figured, we're going down to the bottom of the barrel now as we keep going. We have 3 more bottom of the barrels. Jalen Naylor has played well, touchdown in each game, but his targets are like 4 or less, and that's without Jordan Addison. So when Addison goes back, those targets are going to be probably in the 1 to 3 range. But Naylor has earned trust in the offense. So again, in a deep league stash, he could get a few targets a game. Anything there?
Yeah, I like Naylor a lot. I've been personally adding him myself in like FFPC leagues that I play in, and I believe he has a touchdown streak now of 3 games.
He does.
I mean, even if when Jordan Addison comes back, there's still a potential suspension that can take him out. We haven't heard a lot on that, but I don't know. I think you roster him and you stash him because I think the biggest worry, especially for me, was how is this offense going to perform with Sam Darnold? If this is the version of Sam Darnold and this is the version of the Vikings offense we're going to get, they're going to be a good team. And I think they're going to be able to hang in with the big boys in shootouts.
All right, try not to laugh at me here. I am going to bring a little Jordan Humphrey of the Denver Broncos. So we've learned through 3 weeks that this offense runs a lot through the slot. In week 1, Vele had 8 catches, 39 yards on 8 targets. Wasn't big production, but it's good PPR. Vele hurts his ribs. He misses week 2. Well, then Humphrey steps in 4 for 50 on 5 targets. It's fine. Well, last week, Vele was practicing off the injury report, healthy scratch. On Friday, the team signed Humphrey to a contract. Humphrey comes out, gets 8 targets, goes 6 for 37, which is almost the same stat line that Vele had in week 1. But like I said, in a PPR only league with this team using the slot as often as they are, he could be an emergency depth add when the bye weeks come. Thoughts?
Yeah, he reminds me of the Broncos version of Ray McCloud. Like, how are these guys getting some run? But they are. And now it's Jordan Humphrey. I don't think this is what I said about Beatty before. I don't think Sean Payton expects to go anywhere this year. I think he may have found a quarterback. I like Knicks, but every other position on this offense, I think it's an audition, and he's going to put the best guys in there.
Last one at receiver. I love the player, but I'm very skeptical about yesterday. Trey Tucker goes for 96 yards and a touchdown. Now, he outproduced Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers, who combined together for 81 yards. So that was the kind of anomaly game it was. Adams and Bowers didn't do great. Tucker blew up. Jacoby Myers blew up. Realistically, Tucker is the number 4 option in this offense. You got Adams, you got Bowers, you got Myers, and then Tucker. I just don't know that Gardner Minshew is going to support a 4th receiver. So I'm throwing his name out there because of the stat line, but I'm pretty much saying you got to be in a super deep league or desperate because you've got to guess the spike week. Anthony?
Yeah, he's worth to me stashing because all offseason long we talked about the possibility of a Devontae Adams trade, and that would open up opportunities for Tucker. And I don't know if you heard the post game from Antonio Pierce. He was not happy with some of his veteran players.
And he shouldn't be happy with Zamir White either. Oh my gosh, that's circling the drain fast. All right, we're going to go to the tight end position, Anthony. 2 tight ends, so we'll get through this mercifully. Tyler Conklin, he had 2 terrible games. He does go 5 for 93 against the Patriots. Now, in Conklin's defense, this was the first time the Jets offense looked good all year, and Rodgers was spreading the ball around. Everybody was involved, and when everybody's kind of eating, that middle of the field is open, and Conklin is athletic. A lot of people probably dropped him after week 2. I know I was desperate for tight end, picked him up and started him last week, got lucky with that. Thoughts on Conklin?
Yeah, he should be rostered. He was going drafted fairly high a lot this
Mhm.
offseason. And fantasy football is reactionary. And I can see why people would drop him. But, anybody who was in a league and picked Conklin up, I do think this is the start of something to come. Like the tight end position for Rodgers and in the Nat Hackett offense always had some value. And I don't know if he's a smash start on a week-to-week basis, but this is a player, his next 3 games, Denver, Minnesota, Buffalo, all in a bottom 12 against fantasy tight ends. And he's certainly usable in these matchups.
And then let's talk about Cole Kmet for a minute. He's a streamer right now. We're a tight end too. In week 1, the Bears totally butched it. 48% of the snaps while Gerald Everett played 61, catch for 4 yards. Then all of a sudden, Kmet goes back up to 77% of the snaps in week 2, 5 targets, 4 for 27. Yesterday's not going to be a common game from 11 targets, 10 for 97 and a touchdown. But he does appear to be back in the mix as somebody in the middle of the field who can be relied upon. Again, last week, we're not going to see that, but we should see a good floor from him. Thoughts on Cole Kmet?
Listen, I was never a Cole Kmet guy. And obviously the offseason, it was Gerald Everett preseason cutting it to snaps. In week 1, I think Everett even out-snapped Kmet. Things changed. Last week, Kmet 5 targets, I think had a close to double of Everett's snap. This past game, I don't have the snap share in front of me, but Cole Kmet dominated in every facet. And this is talk about great tight end matchups coming. Cole Kmet should be, I would say he might be a must start the next 3 games.
Yeah, the snap share is so week 1, Kmet had 48%, 77 in week 2, and an 81 last week. It's been completely down for Everett, 61% to 36, and then 33% yesterday because the Bears do play some 2 tight end sets. If you enjoy videos like this, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe to the RotoWire Fantasy Football channel on YouTube. Also, you can check out all of our fantasy football content and our rankings. You can get a free 2-day trial, no credit card needed. Head on over to rotowire.com/Jim, and you can check out all of our content. All right, let's go through a few reactions of Sunday. Derek Carr turns into a pumpkin. The Saints lose to the Eagles. Anthony, this game was 3-0 at the end of the 3rd quarter. The Saints were winning. Here's what I want to point out. It wasn't just Derek Carr. Now, for fantasy, Alvin Kamara had a decent game. He certainly had 29 touches. You're going to do something. And he got isolated on a linebacker for a long catch, which was beautiful. But here's what the Philadelphia Eagles did that made Derek Carr struggle. 142 yards and a touchdown, and even Kamara struggled. We saw they were running a lot of outside zone run, Clint Kubiak thing. What the Eagles did, they had I think it was 6 defensive linemen at points in time. They weren't going nickel. They're like, you know what? We don't think if you can't get that run game going, we don't think your passing game could get kickstarted. And for the most part, the Eagles were kind of right. They basically shut them down. So there's an antidote on film right now as to what to do. Now, whether Clint Kubiak has a counter punch, we'll see. The only player who was great on his opportunities was Chris Olave. All 6 targets, 86 and a touchdown. What are your thoughts on the Saints going forward? Because this is a rough one for them.
Yeah, it was rough, and it was at home. I'm not surprised because of Vic Fangio and what this Eagles team could potentially bring. Now, week 1, I thought it was an anomaly. It was the Carolina Panthers. Week 2, I had higher expectations. I thought Dallas's defense, after what they did to Cleveland, was going to be, pretty good. That wasn't the case. But from what we saw out of Dallas, that Kubiak attacked the weakness, run the ball down their throat. That's going to open up the pass. I don't know if the Saints are as good as their first 2 games. I don't know if they're as bad as they were yesterday. I think they're possibly somewhere in the middle, but I think we're also onto something. If you do not allow them to run the football, the rest of this offense might crumble from under them.
Or I think a moment to segue to a question. Scott Kobas, what would you guys do with Mark Andrews? It seems to be blocking a lot more. Not blocking. He's not on the field. Yeah. Mark Andrews played 33% of the snaps yesterday. He played 74% in week 1, 63% in week 2, 33% last week. Charlie Kohler played 41%. And Charlie Kohler came out of college as a receiver only. He wasn't even considered a blocker. Isaiah Likely played 62% of the snaps. Each of the 3 tight ends had 1 target each. Kohler's the only one that had more than 4 yards. So, no, Andrews isn't blocking at all. He's not on the field. Can't explain it, don't understand it, but I will give the Ravens credit. The Ravens did what they needed to do. Patrick Ricard was only playing 26% of the snaps. He played 51% against Dallas. That's why their run game worked. That's why I said if they keep using Isaiah Likely and Justice Hill as big-time receivers, their season's going to go circle the drain. Well, apparently John Harbaugh got on Todd Monken about it and said, get Patrick Ricard's butt on the field because we can't win without him. Anything on that, Anthony? I know we weren't talking about, but it's a great question.
Yeah, there's certainly time to panic on Mark Andrews. The fact that, Kohler had a few more snaps and obviously Likely. I don't know what to do with Andrews in terms of fantasy football. I don't think you can sell him because you're not going to get market value. And I don't think you can play him until we see something change, because it's not like, he only played, 20 snaps and he was targeted 5 times. He was targeted 1 time.
Now, the Ravens got a big lead, so there's that. Lamar threw 15 passes. I'm still agreeing with you 100% on this, Anthony, but those that are looking for a silver lining, they didn't have to throw. The game on the scoreboard is close. If you just looked at the scoreboard, that game was not close. That game was a butt whooping, and it just, again, garbage time. Dallas got it close. That's fine. You're right. Right now, you can't sell Andrews, and you're really going to struggle to start him unless you have no other option. I do think, though, and so I mentioned they needed to get Ricard on the field, but now there's a second part to this. Once they're doing that, now you could go back to play action because teams will respect the rushing. After Derrick Henry goes off, they could potentially get teams to respect the rushing attack. Now they can open up the entire offense. So we'll see what they do with that. But that would be the out for Andrews. But like Anthony said, right now, it's really tough sledding. All right, let's get back to the game. We were talking about the Eagles game. So Devontae Smith gets knocked out with a concussion, but it was later in the game. So he pretty much had the same stat line 3 games in a row. It's right about 7 catches, right around 75 to 80 yards, does that again. Dallas Goedert goes off. There was a great pick play, gets a 60-yard catch down the sideline, often unguarded. But the real hero, it's Saquon Barkley. It was late in the game, 3-0 in the fourth quarter, I believe, and Barkley rips off a 65-yard touchdown, and he just became Superman at that point. Only 17 carries, but he goes for $147 and 2 touchdowns. If you drafted him in the second round, you hit the lottery. Thoughts on the Eagles right now without A.J. Brown, and you see the limitations?
Yeah, they're limited, but they're still playing Eagles football. They're still finding ways to win. And when it comes to fantasy football, guys are stepping up. Not much of anything was expected out of Goddard, but he stepped up in a big way. Right now, with that big pop week, he's a tight end 1 in PPR. We're seeing Saquon Barkley, and Alvin Kamara is right under him, but Saquon Barkley, 84 total PPR points right now. People laughed at the idea he could go to Philly and have a CMC type of impact and CMC type of season. Well, he's off to a pretty good start.
A pretty good start would be an understatement. So yeah, go Eagles. My thought right now, I'm not a doctor. I'm not in their camp. The Eagles have a week 5 bye. My guess is they hold out A.J. Brown 1 more game, get the bye week, and get him back. I don't know. Maybe he plays this week. Who knows? But again, I know nothing. But I just see with the bye week being that early, they would be foolish to rush him back. But again, you will watch the injury reports this week. If he can get out there and he's fine, they certainly would play him. But just there's that. All right. Reaction number 2. What the heck is going on with CJ Stroud? Everybody expected him to have this blow up season, 40 touchdowns. Well, week 1 against Indy. 234. He does throw 2 touchdowns, so there's that. Then they play the Bears. Bears are a good defense, but they're not Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and Tank Delgood. 260 and 1 touchdown. All right, well, gets Minnesota this week. Now, Brian Flores was a lot of confusing looks. Has brought in some new personnel to kind of mesh what he wants to do. Well, it was a disaster for CJ Stroud. 215, 1 touchdown, and 2 picks. Runs for 12 yards. Doesn't really run much. Right now, CJ Stroud is not a strong fantasy option. He's a borderline, at best, QB1. You run him out there because of the weapons he has, but they got smoked 34-7 by the Vikings. What's going on with CJ Stroud?
I don't know if there now. I think from an NFL point of view, is there a little bit? He's hitting the brick wall because obviously as a rookie comes off and looks like the second coming, and there's always that possible regression from fantasy CJ Stroud is the player I thought he would be. And you remember all off season long, I think both of us might have been out on CJ Stroud as a fantasy football option. And a big reason why, yes, they bring in Diggs, but what people were missing is the fact that they want to run the football. They bring in Mixon and even Cam Akers. I would say he's an upgrade over Damian Pierce and Devin Singletary. We saw that yesterday. I just think, and certainly things can change. CJ Stroud's been in the league for a year and not even a quarter of a season yet. But I think he's going to be a better NFL quarterback than he will be a fantasy football quarterback.
I'm not going to get all technical on everybody here, but I'm going to say a little bit. I pointed out right before cutdown day, they cut all three of their fullbacks. And I said, I get what they're doing. It's a huge mistake. The Slowick offense, they need a fullback on the field to draw an extra defender in the box. I said, automatically now with those fullbacks gone, teams are playing that too high shell. It's limited Patrick Mahomes for a couple of years. It's limited Joe Burrow since it happens. It's the year after Chase went off. Why wouldn't it slow down CJ Stroud as well? Is CJ Stroud better than Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow? Probably not. Definitely not better than Mahomes. Probably not better than Burrow. And, Tank Dell, he's an emerging guy still. He had some great games. Diggs is getting older. That said, they were inviting too high shells, which limit explosives. I think that is the issue. I think they are not prepared to deal with defense that are going to take away the big plays, and they're going to have to live the dink and dunk life like everybody else does. Thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, this was probably the worst game I've seen CJ Stroud play. And, you say it a lot. The NFL has it on film now. And, is this going to be a glimpse of what's to come? Like, is this how you defend this team moving forward?
Yes. Well, the next reaction, number 3. Anthony Richardson may not have the upside that we hoped for. How do I dare say that? As a rusher, week 1, he does score a touchdown, 6 for 56. It was good. We could totally take that. Week 2 against Green Bay, 4 carries, 37 yards. 4 carries, it's not enough. Bears, he does get 8 carries, 24 yards. He has not been the dynamic rushing player, which is why people were drafting as quarterback 5 or 6, because they were expecting him to be an outlier on the ground, like Lamar Jackson numbers plus maybe on the ground. That hasn't happened. As a passer, he has not completed 50% of his passes. And if he doesn't get a bomb connected, he's got nothing. Bears, 10 for 20, 167 yards, and 2 picks. Runs for 24 yards. Train wreck. Even the Packers game, 1 touchdown and 3 picks, 204 yards. Again, 50%. What are we doing to Anthony Richardson right now?
This is one at least early, I feel like I got Stroud right. Well, I definitely got Anthony Richardson wrong. I was using words like he's going to break fantasy football if he stays healthy. Yeah, he's going to break your fantasy team if you keep starting him. Listen, there's no such thing as a good interception, but Anthony Richardson is throwing bad interceptions. I don't know what he's thinking with some of these picks the past 2 games, but is he trying to protect himself? Is it in the back of his head? When I run, am I going to get hurt again? Something's not right, because last year in the small sample size, Anthony Richardson looked like another Lamar Jackson with a bigger frame. So I don't know
44 pounds.
What's going on right now, but it is not good. Michael Pittman, these receivers are not usable in fantasy football. No. Outside of Jonathan Taylor, this roster is a mess. And dare I say, this roster was at a better performing in fantasy with Gardner Minshew. What's going on?
It's a scary, scary thought, but it's true. So are you benching Richardson if you have any other decent option right now until he does something? Or are you going to keep going back to the well?
I mean, I think we certainly have to bench him against Pittsburgh, and maybe Jacksonville. But this run of matchups, Pittsburgh, in Jacksonville, in Tennessee, Miami, and then you get Houston, Minnesota. These matchups, the only way I feel like we could use Richardson in those matchups if he plays like the Richardson of last year.
And right now, that hasn't been around. So that's a tough one. Reaction number 4. The Lions win with rushing and defense over the Cardinals. This was a very well-played game. The score was 20-13. It was close. It wasn't that close. The Cardinals struggled to move the ball consistently with their good offense. Their number 1 run defense bottled up James Conner. Nothing going on the ground. And offensively, Jared Goff threw 23 passes. Well, Montgomery ran it 23 times himself. Gibbs, another 16. So we had 39 rush attempts. You could throw in 3 for Goff and just make that 42 while we're at it. Might have been Neil down in there. But anyway, for fun, 23 passes. They didn't need to throw. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown gets it done. Jamison Williams took the big hit, only 3 targets because they didn't have to throw here. Fine. It's market correction. Week 3 is market correction. Williams had 20 targets in the first 2 games. You're not averaging 10 targets a game. Very few players do. So there's that. Laporta, he still plays 63% of the snaps, dealing with an injury to his ankle. Carted off, came back. He didn't look right. We'll see what imaging shows. But I thought, Anthony, it was super impressive. The Lions, this is the showing that this team can play for a Super Bowl because they can run the ball down your throat. They can stay committed to it. And the defense is good enough to keep them in games. Thoughts on the Lions?
Fantasy football wise, this team we thought coming into this year, there's going to be a lot of fantasy football juggernauts. And after the first 2 games, what it was Jamison Williams. Then we see Amon-Ra get going. Laporta, I have some concerns over Laporta, as I do about a lot of these top end tight ends we drafted, which is why it's such a volatile position. We should not, or at least I shouldn't get caught in that trap again, because I got caught in that tight end trap this year. But, let's figure out who this Lions team is and who they want to be. They want to run the ball with Gibbs and Montgomery, and they want to win with defense. If they didn't have to throw, I don't know if they would.
You mentioned the tight end, and I play in a league called the Kings Classic, 14-team league, bunch of industry experts, 3 flex positions, and one person in the auction league decided he had this great idea. I'm going to corner the market on tight ends because I could flex them. So he got Kelsey, he got Laporta, he got Kincaid. He got another one, and they're all doing a whole lot of nothing. That, in theory, fun plan. In reality, wrong year to do it. All right, our 5th big reaction was supposed to be the Ravens. We talked about it already. We wove it in because Scott Cobb had the good question. It was timely. We brought it up. So that is what we have for today. Keep tuning in. If you are not on RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube, you need to head over there. Some of you are watching it there now. You need to subscribe. You need to like, hit the notifications button. We have content going up there all the time. Myself and Anthony are frequent workers on the site. So we definitely have stuff for you. We appreciate if you give us a follow. Anthony's at The Real NFL Guru. I'm over at Jim Coventry NFL. Remember, free RotoWire trial, no credit card needed. RotoWire.com/Jim. For Anthony Cervino, I'm Jim Coventry. Have a great day, everyone.